For centuries, people have created or set aside places to honor what they value. From ancient burial sites to great cathedrals, soaring spaces and towering steeples that fill the sky and thrill the spirit. That same urge to honor is evident throughout the Indianapolis landscape. Old photos of the cityscape show a skyline pierced with steeples, symbols of mainline Christian denominations in the heart of the city. As Indianapolis grew, religious structures began to share the downtown with cathedrals of another sort, civic and fraternal groups with religious roots, and patriotic shrines to American war heroes. Today, many congregations have migrated outward, and the center of the city is now dominated by monuments to business, government, and sport. That says a lot about the city, but it doesn't say it all. Although the events that bring the community together now are often civic rather than religious, the sacred still exists, sometimes in unexpected places.
Hello, I'm Marcy Davis. Faith and community, the public role of religion, aims to deepen our understanding of the diversity and vitality of religion in America, its people, institutions, and ideas, and their influence on our life together. The series is based on a study, the largest of its kind, that included interviews with religious and civic leaders, congregational members, and public citizens in metropolitan Indianapolis, a study conducted by the Polis Center at Indiana University, Purdue University, Indianapolis. An earlier series, Religion as a Window on Culture, illustrates the variety of religions that are practiced in the United States. But what we sometimes overlook is the diversity we find within America's predominant religious tradition, Christianity, its complexities and relationships to the larger culture and to other religions. In looking at this tradition in Indianapolis, we hope to provide a window through which other American cities can be viewed. With a population of 1.5 million people, Indianapolis is big enough to be diverse, yet small enough to comprehend. Through 11 episodes, Faith and Community will introduce you to the public role of religion.
You can tell a place is sacred by how it is used and how it is treated. Sacred space can be defined as that mysterious place where architecture, music, or art intersect with the holy.
Sacred space induces and exemplifies awe. Moses sees a burning bush and hears a voice, and the bush is not consumed. And the voice says, "Take the shoes off your feet, because the ground you're standing on is holy ground." Becomes sacred space as much as if there were a cathedral built over it. It is mysterious. Who are you? It is tremendous. He's awed. It's fascinating. He can't run away from it.
A place can feel sacred because it recalls a momentous event in personal or public history. A moment so profound that it challenges people to consider what matters. What is worth living for? What is worth dying for? Religious institutions create spaces for sacred observance, spaces intended to lift the participant above everyday concerns.
It is a focus that is recognized as a religious focus, a God, a divine, a transcendent sort of experience that, again, is tied to a history, to traditions that are collectively practiced and recognized, and that carry a kind of power by virtue of being able to be outside of us, that we see them as standing over against us sometimes and able to call us into question and account when our behavior doesn't match up with what we say we ought to be doing.
The grand holy spaces of major Christian denominations are here. The human meets the divine in the full array of traditional Christian art and icons. Stained glass windows depicting stories from Holy Scripture abound.
Daylight is the most essential element for architects who are doing spiritual places. The oldest primitive peoples based their structures on what the sun did, what the light did. Two examples of those are Stonehenge, of course, and then more dramatic in a way, Newgrange in Ireland, where 5,000 years old, where the sunlight came in one day of the year on the altar, and that was their the epitome of their year.
The play of dimension and light and shade and sound and silence and consecration by the people who use it makes sacred space.
Orthodox Christians surround themselves with icons that they describe as windows into heaven. Large modern structures dot the suburban landscape, structures built on campuses in anticipation of large followings. Glass is predominant, but does not necessarily depict religious scenes. In the late 1960s, following the beginning of the ecumenical movement within the Catholic Church, architect Evans Woolen was asked by the pastor of St. Thomas Aquinas to design a sacred space that would update the notion of what a Catholic church looks like.
He told us to show him a design where the people wrapped as much as possible around the altar, where the distances between the last pew and the speaker were as short as possible, where we could achieve intimacy.
The simple, stripped-down sanctuary, with the traditional cross created by negative space, allows churchgoers to shift their focus away from gilded statuary and ornate carvings toward light and matters of the spirit.
The light in the church is the true essence of the design in terms of trying to create a spiritual place. The big effort to create light descending on the cross that would be reflected back into the room is the punch, as it were, of this church, and in some way or another of every church.
There are lots of medium and small churches throughout the city, filling the needs of their faithful every day, regardless of location or size or wealth. Intimate chapels create islands of solemnity in the midst of daily bustle. In the Indianapolis landscape can be seen a proliferation of churches, with church plantings and congregational growth, all contributing to an increase in acreage that is exempt from taxation.
The clash comes in areas where congregations want to buy more property in an area that say has a low tax base. And so you have more property taken off the tax rolls.
Many foundations that have large properties, large buildings, make pilot payments, payments in lieu of taxes, P-I-L-O-T. And to me, they should. They have the wherewithal to do that. And they are there, their building is protected by fire and police, and their roads are paved, and they get government services. So I do not think they ought to pay taxes, because I do support the laws that protect them as tax-exempt entities. But I strongly favor the use of the payment in lieu of taxes, pilot approach, by those charities and those churches that can afford to do so.
In addition to issues of taxation, some citizens are increasingly concerned about congregational expansion that includes more parking lots, traffic congestion, commercial enterprises, and outdoor concerts. Others, however, see a benefit.
I actually view that the positive effect of a church to community, right, Faith Mosque Church well exceeds the lost property tax opportunities.
We'll let them
Non-Christian
stand on that
spaces
side.
are
I'd
also
like the two
visible
of you
throughout the
to
city.
come and stand next to that.
An entire neighborhood on the northwest side might be considered sacred. Schools, synagogues, a community center are gathering places for the local Jewish community, many of whom live nearby. Near the street is a dramatic symbol of Judaism, while in a quieter space, visitors can reflect on the horrors of the Holocaust, memorialized in bronze. Most world religions are represented in the greater metropolitan area. How they adorn their holy places, or don't, reflects their beliefs. Many Muslim spaces are unadorned and starkly beautiful. A Hindu altar is the focal point for elaborate rituals that reflect a belief in the many manifestations of one God.
I believe that any space can be sacred. It doesn't require stained glass. It doesn't require a Gothic building. It doesn't require slate on the roof.
But clay works and adobe works and straw works and almost any substance works. If the intention then is to set aside to say, here's where we're going to let the transcendent work upon us.
By that definition, sacred space can be found in unexpected places. And the blurring of the sacred and the secular can occur as spaces are put to unintended uses.
There's all these other places that are converted temporarily as a sacred space. And so there's more sacred space than is recognized by property ownership or a property list. And so on one hand, it shows that the sacred is not limited to what a congregation owns, but it's broader than that. And the society is open to that and tries to figure out what criteria is used and how do we decide who can use it and can't use it.
Regardless of how
A public school rents its auditorium and classrooms to a congregation for Sunday mornings. A local theater hosts contemporary Christian worship, coffee and bagels included. A prayer meeting is held in the Indiana State House. Storefronts and strip malls serve fledgling congregations on the way to their own sacred structures. Individuals also create sacred spaces in their homes.
God's peace be in this home.
A city street plagued by violence and death is blessed along with the victims.
In everything we have won more than victory because of Christ who loves us.
And the reverse can occur as well. An old church converted into an avant-garde theater. A church building abandoned by its growing population, sold to the city to become public space. In addition to obviously sacred spaces, communities also set aside places with special meaning.
I just think it's important to the human spirit to have places that make you stop and sort of think and recharge your batteries or whatever it is you do in those spaces. And sometimes we lose sight of that. And great architects and great landscape designers and great thinkers never lose sight of that.
Most cities erect monuments that recall times of momentous conflict or heroic triumph. Inside the Indianapolis downtown Mile Square is an unusually large collection of memorials, as sacred to the city as any temple or mosque.
An architect who visited Indianapolis once said, for the sake of Indianapolis real estate, I hope there are no more wars.
The spire of the Soldiers and Sailors Monument on the Circle marks the city's center. Built more than 100 years ago, it honors fallen heroes of the Civil War and the Spanish-American War. The Indiana War Memorial on the American Legion Mall honors those who gave their lives in the 2 world wars, Korea, and Vietnam.
It's a memorial for a whole generation of young men who were killed in the war to end wars. It has an immediately tragic overtone of the loss of a whole generation of young people.
Based on an ancient monument, the design is both majestic and solemn.
It's the classical world's version of the Gothic church, in a way, with the blue stained glass and the dim light and the marble and the great columns. The proportions of the room are heroic, as the proportions of the church or temple were expected to be. The relative darkness is very important compared to the glaring Hoosier sunlight that we've come from. These are things that all go together to make you feel awestruck, sad, and maybe a little patriotic.
In 1995, the USS Indianapolis Memorial was dedicated to all who perished in one of the most horrific incidents of World War II.
That's a kind of litmus test of all sacred spaces, whether you're looking at a mountain or a river or a building. It makes you stop and think about your purpose of being here. A sacred space is like meditation. It makes you slow down.
The probably unintended consequence is that these are sacred spaces that they're not going to build strip malls on. I mean, they're always going to be here, they're going to be green, they're going to be enjoyed by families, by visitors, and will give this city a special flavor in addition to the memorialization of the wars. But there are trees, there are flowers, they're well maintained, they will always be important spaces.
Yet the way such spaces are used is evolving. These memorials aren't always set apart, and they aren't places where people feel obligated to dress up and murmur in low voices. Both the American Legion Mall and Monument Circle are used regularly for community events and celebrations. A city intersection recalls the triumphs and heartbreaking losses of cancer victims and their survivors. Temporary memorials appear at places of immense sorrow.
We've made accident sites. You know, you see along the street, along highways, crosses now. Or when there's been a terrible tragedy, people now have brought flowers and almost build a shrine there. It's a temporary one. It often doesn't remain that way for generations. But something has happened here, and we need to demarcate this space and say this is a different kind of space.
Cemeteries also call for the transcendence of spirit. Crown Hill Cemetery in Indianapolis features a hilltop that has acquired special status because of the tomb of local poet James Whitcomb Riley and many other prominent citizens who are buried there, and its dramatic setting.
It's quiet, it's peaceful, you feel like you're on the top of the world there. And so if there's a time when I need to step away for a minute, sometimes I can be found there.
The outdoors can also be set aside as sacred, such as the park commemorating the events in Indianapolis following the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. Robert Kennedy was campaigning here and called for calm. Indianapolis was one of only a few urban areas that escaped violent demonstrations and rioting that night.
In the case of civic space, it's the community itself that is transcendent. And certainly it's valuable to us to recognize a kind of collective transcendence that says to us, you know, we're together as a community, and, you know, it's not just about me. It's about being a part of this larger community that has a history, that has a future, that has certain kinds of moral expectations of each other. And to the extent that we have spaces that help us to do that, all to the good.
As the civic religions of government, business, and sports gain prominence, the boundaries between sacred and secular might be crossed entirely.
There's always a tendency for us to take national symbols and make them more important than the religious symbols, or make them religious symbols.
When the new arena for the Indiana Pacers was built, the grandeur of the building was heralded with a billboard that tried to link the holy with the commercial world of sport. And down the street, Indianapolis Colts football fans are motivated by an ancient word of faith: believe.
There are certainly many people who spend their Sundays going to sports events. And yes, in some strange way, that is sort of religion-like. But I don't think most people who are participating really do see that what they are doing is really equivalent to what they do if they are part of a religious community or what they would do if they were a part of a religious community. They know there's a difference.
If you've been in the presence in sacred space of something other, capital O, bigger than you are, other than you are, whatever you want to say, you leave different.
Instilling meaning in a collection of timbers and bricks is a profoundly human thing to do, stating that a place or object means more than what it is made of. A sacred space has transforming power that can derive from why it was built, or how it is used, whose values it embodies. These religious sacred spaces that draw together particular communities now share the landscape with civic sacred spaces that bring together the larger city. How a community balances the sacred and the secular reveals much about what it values, and which values are most publicly expressed. While the grand old churches now share their spaces with cathedrals of business, government, and sport, truly sacred spaces still abound, in ways that aren't always apparent at first. Sometimes it's necessary to look again, look around, and look beyond. If you are interested in additional episodes or more information, visit our website at faithandcommunity.org.